Jehovah Rapha. Jehovah Rapha, the Lord who heals. And I'm going to be looking at it, Exodus chapter 15, verses 22 through 26 for our text today. But do you remember that Bible passage that I asked you all to memorize out of Proverbs 18 and verse 10? The name of the Lord is, go ahead and, I want me to start over again. The name of the Lord is a strong tower. The righteous run to it, and they are safe. I thought maybe Russell had that passage up because it's the next one. There you go. The name of the Lord is a strong tower. The righteous run to it and are safe. You know, the name of the Lord. And all these various names are God's description of who He is. And He is our healer. He is the Lord who heals. And every single one of us stands in need of healing. This is a sin-sick world that we live in. And it isn't all the things that come to you in the way of hurt and in the need that you have for healing. It doesn't always come from your own personal sin. It comes from the fact that we live in a world that's messed up by sin. But there's also our own mess-ups and other diseases that come into our lives that we need to know Jehovah Rapha. Now, in Exodus chapter 15, the text I want to look at this morning, you got to have a little bit of background here. You guys all watch, Charlton Heston, right? So you know the Ten Commandments. You know how they left the land of Egypt. You know how they came, through the wilderness wanderings. You know how miraculously and powerfully that God worked miracles and brought them out of that land of slavery. And they hadn't been out free for very long. They had sung this wonderful song, Miriam, the song of Moses, and they're just partying, and it wasn't too much later after that, in chapter 15, they begin complaining and grumbling. Now, before we're too harsh on them, have you and I ever done that? I mean, here we do. We come off a high where God has just worked mightily in our lives, and how long is it again before something that comes into our life that we're not happy about, and we start grumbling and griping and complaining. And I used to be so hard on the Israelites until I realized I do the same thing. And so they find themselves out into the wilderness and they're getting a little thirsty. And so, verse 22, chapter 15. Moses led Israel from the Red Sea. You remember that? Charlton Heston parted the Red Sea. They went across on dry ground. Moses did. For 3 days they traveled in the desert without finding any water. When they came to Marah, they couldn't drink the water because it was bitter. That's what Marah means. It's bitter. So the people grumbled against Moses, saying, "What are we going to drink?" Well, I got a little parenthesis in there, by the way. Moses, welcome to leadership. Welcome to leadership, It's always easier to grumble, isn't it? And so they begin to grumble. "Where are we going to drink, Moses?" Moses cried out to the Lord, and the Lord showed him a piece of wood. Now I want you all to remember this piece of wood. God doesn't do anything without a reason. I always wonder, why did He give him a piece of wood? Takes a piece of wood, throws it into the water, and the water became sweet. Remember that piece of wood. Must have been some fancy chemical reaction that happened there. Threw that wood in there, and all the water is good to drink. There the Lord made a decree and a law for them, and there He tested them. He said, "If you listen carefully to the voice of the Lord your God, and you do what is right in His eyes, if you pay attention to His commands and keep all His decrees, I will not bring on you the diseases I brought on the Egyptians, for I am the Lord who heals you." What it says there in the Hebrew is, "I am Jehovah Rapha." I am the Lord who heals you. Never forget this, Israel. Never forget this new song. Our God is the God who heals us. Again, we live in a sin-cursed world, and every single solitary bit of humanity is in the need of healing. Mark chapter 2 is on the next slide. It takes us now into the New Testament where Jesus is sitting with some people who are definitely in need of healing. physical healing, emotional healing, but most of all spiritual healing. But there was a group of righteous people, self-righteous people, who felt like, we're fine. There's nothing wrong with us. As a matter of fact, they came against Jesus in his message as Jehovah Rapha, as the great physician, and Jesus said to them, you know, it's not healthy people who need a doctor, but it's sick people. And I've come to heal sick people. If you feel like you're fine and dandy, then you don't need me. The trouble is, they were some of the sickest people. What a great lesson in and of itself for every one of us. As we look, are we in denial of needing healing? We can't use the great physician if we think that we're all right. I've just got a couple of things I want to clarify on Jehovah Rapha, because as we look at this healing thing, man, I tell you what, it gets a bad rap. I got on the internet this week, but of course I wasn't born into the kingdom, so to speak. As a kid, I grew up, I saw all kinds of junk, participated in all kinds of junk, but I also saw a lot of stuff on TV that really turned me off. And guys with really nice slick back hair, wearing Rolodexes, and driving fancy cars, smacking people on the head. They're flying all over the place. Be healed, you know. And I always question stuff like that. You know, my mom named me right when she named me Thomas. Because, boy, I tell you, I want to check that stuff out. And I tell you what, I also grew up in a religious group that really believed, yeah, we believe in the Holy Spirit, but really the Holy Spirit was just someone who wrote the book, and then he went off on vacation and said, there's the book, I hope everything works out okay. See me when you come to heaven. And see, to think that God doesn't heal today is also wrong. But to also fake stuff is wrong. And so I really want to get a balance today and look at the idea of how Jehovah Rapha works, our God who heals, the Lord who heals, and He heals physically. He heals emotionally. He heals spiritually. As a matter of fact, every single solitary bit of healing comes from Jehovah Rapha. Every bit of healing. But don't take our God and put Him in some kind of box and begin to tell Him what He can and cannot do. That is wrong. Don't ever tell God what He can and cannot do. And so I've been in a group where they said, God, you have to do this. And I had another group that I was in, and they said, God basically doesn't do that today. And I thought, that's not the truth. Let's find out what the truth is about Jehovah Rapha. The fact of the matter is, if God created, and He did, because He's Elohim, He is the creator God, if He made it, He can fix it. Never doubt God's power to heal physically. Whenever you're praying for someone, when we gather around with people, we lay hands on him, who knows but what God's going to work His miraculous healing power through you. Believe as you pray that God can heal. Sometimes we think with regards to our faith and healing that it's somehow something I have to conjure up, and if I have enough of this willpower that somehow I'll be able to twist the arm of God and get Him to do something that basically He really doesn't want to do.